So there's an incredible panel for you that will be moderated by Dan Nyabadza. Dan is a technologist, writer, and founder of the Griot Post. So, hey Dan.
Hi.
I'll leave it with you.
Are we live?
Yeah, we're live, and I'll leave it with you. And have a great session.
Thank you. I'm super excited for everybody who is joining us in this session, supporting employees' mental and physical health. I think we have Candida from Accenture, we have Sally from ServiceNow, and we have, why is it like? And we also have Alessandro Lavi, I think. I will let our guests introduce themselves for the session. Thank you.
Hi, well, I'm happy to go first. My name is Alessandro, or Alex Lavia, and I am from a digital wellbeing consultancy called Live More Offline, and I help organizations to enhance wellbeing, performance, and human connection through healthy digital habits. And it's a real pleasure to be here with you, Dan, and the rest of the panel today.
Shall I go next alphabetically? My name is Candida Mottershead. I'm the HR director for Accenture in the UK and Ireland. So look after HR for all of our people here, and I've obviously had a very busy time over the last 12 months or so. I'm also really pleased to join Dan and Alex and Sally and everybody on this call.
So hello everyone, my name is Sally Sourbron and I lead the HR function for the ServiceNow EMEA business. ServiceNow is an enterprise software company focused on delivering workflow solutions for organizations. Delighted to be here. Hello panel.
I think coming into COGEX, one of the conversations that we have is how do we get the next 10 years right? So I'm going to start with Candida. I think speaking in terms of mental health, digital well-being, do you think we're going to get it right in the next 10 years?
Well, I think we're all going to do our very best to get it right. I don't think anybody gets anything 100% right, but it's a journey that many organisations have been on already. COVID has acted as a bit of a catalyst, actually, for companies to really focus on the mental health of their people. We've had mental health allies, and many companies have introduced mental health allies over the last few years, and that has been really important for our people as we moved into COVID. But looking forward, we're all now working through how we help our people come out of COVID, what we do with where people work, how we can be flexible. I think it's really important that we take a step back and don't race into deciding how we're going to manage things for our people going forward. I think it's important to hear our people's voices, to understand what they would like, what they need, and just balancing that with what we need to do, what we all need to do as businesses. And for us, you know, how we have to support our clients. But I think it's very important that we get our people's voice and we understand how they're feeling and where they feel that they want to go from a working perspective. So this is like a pivotal moment, isn't it? I think there'll be a pre and post COVID when we look back in years to come around how we looked after our talent and particularly how we looked after their mental health, their physical health, and their resilience.
Sally, same question to you. What's your take?
Yeah, it's really quite interesting, very much aligned with Candida there. We've obviously, as a tech organization, we're very much focused on our employees' experience. Fortunately, with the technology that we actually create, we enable our employees to work digitally, and obviously that has helped certainly through the pandemic. I think in the world of tech, and I can speak for a number of tech companies and colleagues, we have been working flexibly since before the pandemic. The interesting thing, interesting dynamic that we're noticing actually is when we all switched to work virtually 100% of the time, there was a phenomenal amount of effort of all organizations really sort of investing in their digital experiences for their employees. But what's actually happened is, I think we were so overwhelmed by just getting that right for employees to enable, to continue to enable productivity across organizations, that we didn't actually think how work gets done. So if you think about flipping that switch, everyone's working remotely. What we haven't done is actually enabled employees, enabled managers to actually work in the best way, digitally and remotely. And that's certainly something that I'm working on within my organization at ServiceNow, and hearing from peers across the industry to see how do we actually then transform to work more sustainably in this way for the future. So I think that nicely aligns, Dan, to your question. Like, we're still learning. I can give a couple of examples of where I think personally we should be going with regards to how we drive interactions potentially between an employee and their manager, building out something like a social contract so that those individuals can work together and understand clear expectations of how that working relationship is going to work in this new world. I also see us thinking differently about the purpose of the office. So what are the employee experiences that we want to drive through an office? So how do we create sort of collaboration and innovation so that there really is that purpose-led experience of coming to the workplace? And those are just a sort of a few starters to think about. But ultimately, it's driving engagement, it's driving that whole sort of wellness and well-being around how do you create now a work-life integration and sort of bury the old norm of work-life balance. And I think that probably leads nicely onto maybe hearing from Alex, because this is her specialization.
Indeed.
Alex, perhaps you could add onto what Sally was saying.
Oh, fabulous. And it's just so wonderful to hear these contributions from Candida and Sally, and hearing organisations that are already so focused in this area and looking at this. And I would wholeheartedly agree with both. So I think that this is a pivotal moment where we have been propelled into a new normal. And as Sally mentioned, many of us have transitioned to remote working in one sharp burst overnight, and are having to now look at how will we make this sustainable. When we first went to remote working, many people thought this was a matter of months, but it's looking like, you know, this is actually going to be a feature of our working lives going forward. And if organizations transition from fully remote to hybrid working, then there are a whole new set of considerations as well, that if we think about this intentionally and set up our culture in a really intentional way, we can make our organizational cultures something that's really a strategic asset, something that really attracts an increasingly mobile and diverse workforce. So that is the potential here. And I think in terms of how to get there, then I agree with Candida that it's all about listening to our individual employees. There's been some fascinating research that's been coming out around this. And one thing that we've seen from a Microsoft report recently is that leaders' experiences of whether they're thriving or surviving in the remote environment is very different to other demographics within their organization. So when polled, 61% of leaders said they were thriving, whereas for new starters, it was only 38%, I think, or maybe 36% of new employees who were thriving at work. So that means that leaders really need to feel connected and open up those channels of conversation so that they actually know what are the challenges to address. And in the hybrid environment, I think what we will see is a lot more on digital presenteeism, this pressure to be connected, to be visible when working remotely, which I'd be happy to talk more about. But also, you know, there are many aspects such as back-to-back video calls, messages out of work hours have increased more than messages during work hours, although both have increased. And so how do you create the human behaviors that will enable our people to enhance their well-being, performance and feel more connected within the office.
I totally agree with you, Alex, actually, because, you know, one of the things we're really talking about is a modern leader. So our leaders need to be different. We need to help them on a journey to work with their people in a different way from how they might have worked before. And that having that conversation, that individualization is really, really key. And it is a different world for everybody. And actually our leaders need to be helped to bring their people and their teams along with them. And there are so many things changing in the world at the moment. COVID has obviously been part of that. And having people then working at home, as you say, in a hybrid environment, it's going to be key that our leaders understand how they bring their people with them over the next months and years as we move forward.
Absolutely. And I think for leaders, it's more challenging than, well, there are many challenges because they have their own personal challenges in adapting to the remote environment. They may be juggling childcare at home as well. And then they have this additional challenge of how do I lead people in this new hybrid environment? And do you have the time to get up to speed on what software applications are available that can help you to connect more easily? We're all on this big learning curve. So the leaders themselves definitely need to be supported so that they can then onwards support their people. I would wholeheartedly agree.
So just building on that, one exercise we've done recently with some leaders actually is sort of challenging the way in which they lead. So our leaders need to sort of lead with compassion, not empathy. And what I mean by that is that empathy, you feel for the person, yet compassion is empathy plus actually action. So I really want to hold our leaders accountable so that when maybe there is that request for a meeting out of hours, or where we're seeing sort of bad behaviours or bad habits that have occurred around sort of etiquette from remote working, it really takes action and calls it out and really tries to challenge that and sort of integrate a better behaviour that they want for their team. So that's just one little tip that we've started to look at already.
Yeah, and we've been sort of encouraging people to do things. I'm sure you've been doing similar things. Is, you know, let's have meetings. You know, with Alex, you mentioned the back-to-back calls when you're at home, which seem to happen. You know, let's just do a 25-minute meeting rather than a 30-minute. Let's do a 55-minute meeting. Let's make sure that we try and not do meetings all through Friday, so people have time to focus on other things that they need to do. And I think those are really important, that we need our leaders to role model that, because yes, we can say it, but actually people have to see it and feel it to know that actually they've got permission to do that as well. So I think I think it's really important. There's just little changes, little habits and tweaks to how we work that are really important.
Absolutely. And I think with tweaks. Oh, sorry. I'll say quickly. Oh no, sorry, go on, Dan.
Sorry, Alessandro, just to backtrack a bit, I heard you talk about technologies before we start taking questions. What sort of technologies do you think are best to use in this time right now for remote work, other than your standard video conferencing software that would encourage a healthier balance of mental health and digital cultures or so?
Absolutely. So there are so many options, and I think that even within basic applications or standard applications like Outlook, have we explored all of the settings that are available? So for instance, you can change your standard meeting times within Outlook so that they default to 25 minutes and 50 minutes. And within my training, I'm all about marrying the technology, so making your technology work for you, and the human behavior side. So using those standard meeting times, using delay delivery, so when you're sending email late at night so that it arrives with the recipient in mind, using rules with Outlook to just move, if it's technical updates, so that they don't even hit your inbox and distract you, but you can go into that folder later in the week and check them. But in terms of new things that are available, there are loads of online polling tools and collaboration tools that can make virtual meetings much more engaging. And probably not wanting to mention specific names, but yeah, there's many such applications out there. And what I like to do when working with organizations is use tools that are available free of charge, so that people can actually use the tools that they can then go ahead and experiment with, that don't hit the budget afterwards. And there are many free of charge options out there that can increase engagement. That also helps people to feel like they're seen and they're heard within meetings, because everybody is contributing via these online polling mechanisms. So they're just a few. And then blocker apps as well, if you're finding you're getting too distracted by particular sites or apps. There's many ways you can use technology to manage your relationship with technology.
Right, Sally, adding on to that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I'm spoilt. So our company actually helps make the world of work better for people. That's our purpose. And so the purpose of the company is to obviously remove work from, let's say, waste work from employees. So we create workflows across organizations. So for us, it's kind of, certainly speaking from an HR perspective, I'm a customer as well as a user of our technology, and it has been amazing, certainly in the pandemic, how that's really helped us. So just to give an example, if I look at our employee population across EMEA, we have around about 28% of those individuals who've got less than 12 months service, which means they've been hired through the pandemic. And what we've managed to do is we've hired them digitally. So that whole onboarding experience, as an example, everything that they get introduced into the organization, whether it's obviously their contract, whether it's all the policy frameworks, whether it's meeting, let's say, peers, meeting their manager, choosing the tech that they want to use, all those sorts of wonderful things happens before day one. So as soon as they join us on day one, they have a short introduction to meet different organizations within the company. Then they're off and running, and they're out being productive and doing their job. And those 28% of employees that we've hired in the last 12 months, 95% of them would actually recommend that whole sort of enterprise onboarding experience to colleagues and other individuals. So this has really transformed the way in which we've managed to continue to operate virtually in a large-scale growth perspective. So if we think about employee journeys using workflows, that's been certainly a sweet spot for us.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
Candida.
Yeah, so I agree, Sally. I mean, the onboarding process and going virtual on that, it seems a bit daunting to start with, but actually the feedback that we get around that process has been, been really good. Other places where we've used tech. So obviously there are collaboration tools and there are various different new tools coming out all the time, and new technologies where you can use different technologies for sort of networking purposes, so you can do more community events. So it's really interesting at trying the different technologies that come, but also from a well-being, from a physical and mental health perspective. We were moving anyway away from the sort of the historical traditional gym subsidy that we gave, and we've now got a platform that we use to curate various different physical and mental apps that are available that we can share with our people, so that actually they don't need to be in the office, they don't need to be anywhere but in their own living room to use the various different fitness apps and mental health apps, helping with stress, helping with sleep, mindfulness, but also, the physical. You don't need to be at a gym. You don't need a personal trainer. You can log on and do that in your in the comfort of your own home.
With your pets, if you want them with you, can't you? We've seen a lot of that
with my dog.
Right, there's Andrew Roberts-Ray here who's saying, isn't it that part of the problem that as human beings we need social time with others? When working at home, too much time is spent working and too little socializing. and he has been coaching students to add time. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
I think that's true. I think we all feel it, don't we? I'm sure every one of us on this call feels that they've missed that social aspect of being in the office. I'm actually in the office today for the first time since last March, which is really exciting. I didn't expect to be here, but I am here today, and I've seen people, and it's been great to catch up. So I think, when we're thinking about offices, we're thinking about, how do we use that space maybe a little bit differently? How do we use it for collaboration, for community events? We'll obviously still need workspace, but how do we make sure that we use it so that people get the social side of things, but also the creative side of things when they're meeting, when they come into the office? So that's really important. And I know many of us have tried different options of how we can be more social at the other end of a video call. I mean, we've done sort of cooked dinners together and have drinks and have quizzes, and they work. They work for a bit, but they're not quite the same as the social aspect. So I think as we move out of the situation we've been in, then I think we'll all be very keen to get some time back in the office. To see people and to share ideas.
Yeah, I fully agree. It's definitely moving forward, thinking about purpose-led experiences in that office. And I'm in the office as well today, so I've been in a couple of weeks now, on a couple of days each week. And it's interesting because I feel lost when I don't have anyone here from my network. And so it's kind of like, again, you want to feed off of that interaction. So I think that's kind of where it needs to sort of be led by employees and managers and teams alike to sort of agree, like, when they're coming to the office, what are they going to be doing there? How can they leverage the best use of that face-to-face time? So I think that's a learning for all of us, Andrew. So great question.
Yeah, I think there's a brilliant contribution there. And
speaking about, you can go, Alessandro.
Oh, so I think the only thing that I would add to that is fantastic contributions, and I think would be absolutely that belonging is incredibly important, and the social side does contribute to both well-being and performance, and the science supports that. So what can we do to create that social support, which is much more challenging in the online environment? And I think the solution from my perspective, when I'm teaching virtual connection, is around embedding social connection into the ways in which you work. So at the start of manager one-to-ones, can you be sure to have 5-10 minutes where you're having an informal chat about how things are going, knowing that that time is actually crucial? And I've heard other companies using a framework of buddying up like scuba divers, where every single employee has one other person within their team that they check in on at least once a week, that's purely from an informal perspective, as one human being to another, just checking in on how you're doing, because it's those informal human connections which disappear quite easily in the remote environment. And then other small changes. Can you allow people to dial in 10 minutes early before a meeting starts if they want to have informal connection? Because not everybody will, but some people will find that immensely valuable. And again, in the human environment, it would be those corridor chats as you are walking to the meeting, where you'd be asking about how are things going. So allowing people to dial in early. And finally, the strength of networks. So I think with Sally sharing, with so many new onboarders who haven't had the opportunity to work in the office, how can you help these new starters to be able to create the networks to draw on? Because the research also shows those networks contribute both to our well-being, but even to our performance. So they are vital too. So can leaders champion that and facilitate that?
Yeah, actually,
Right.
Sorry, I was just going to add one more point to what Alex was saying, because what we've been running, and this is partly because of the growth of our organization. So if you think about all of those new hires, it's about how do we cultivate our culture and keep it strong, and to make sure that it sort of relates back to our core values. And we've created culture champions across our different geo markets, and those teams really have done an amazing job as we pivoted virtually to really think about how they come together to drive local initiatives, to engage the wider population that they represent, such as like just giving back time in our communities. So we've been doing some virtual giving, charitable sort of work, as well as running sort of shed talks, as well as doing other sort of physical well-being challenges amongst those different country teams. So that's been amazing to see. And talking back on those new hires, we did have a nickname for them at a period of time, which was our COVID castaways. But hopefully speak for all of them that they have never felt that they were a castaway, that they've been an integral part of the team since they joined the organisation.
And I think if and when we all start getting back into the office a bit more than we maybe have been, we really need to think about those new joiners, particularly those junior joiners that have come straight out of school or straight out of university. They won't have worked in an office environment, and potentially they all come back en masse. We need to be really thoughtful about how we help them, just with the etiquette and how it is to work with others in an office.
I'm more interested also, moving on, in Candida and Sally, perhaps, how are you involving your employees in the process of developing those policies that are supposedly helping them? Are they involved in the actual processes, or it's a handover process where you just develop policy and they need to comply?
So I think there's a bit of both. So there are policies that we're going to have that are very specific, and that's part of how we would run a business. But there's also a lot of things that happen, and a lot of ways that we do things. There are benefits that we can introduce, where I do think that all of us need to, like I said before, we need to listen to our people and understand what they want, what they're looking for. I mean, we've just done sort of this very large hackathon called Change at Work that we did across our countries in Europe, and I did it all on a platform, again using that technology, and really having that conversation and encouraging our people to have the conversations between them around how they were feeling. Obviously giving them some questions. It ran over 3 days, and you could just pop in for 15 minutes to answer some of the key questions and have a discussion and go backwards and forwards with others who are answering, just to start getting that conversation going in a way that we could take all the feedback and bring it together, and then look at how our people are feeling and what we might do. So we could look at it in the different countries as well. But I do think it is really important. We're in a different place now. We're in a different world, and there are so many different things that have happened over the last 12 to 18 months that we need to be listening to our people, and we need to be acting on how they're feeling, and making sure that they do feel safe, seen, and connected with the organisation.
I love that, Candida. I'm going to steal that. I love the idea of a hackathon. That sounds amazing. I mean, obviously, we've been doing well-being surveys, or certainly on a monthly basis in the critical elements of the crisis, as well as obviously on top of our standard engagement surveys. So we're really trying to listen and understand our employee sentiments, and then really then act upon that. And certainly, exactly the same as Candida described, just sort of that would then influence any sort of policy making and framework making that we're creating at the moment. But then again, against the backdrop of the purpose of the company, of the culture of the company, and how we hold all of that true, and certainly diversity, inclusion, and indexing on belonging, to Alex's point, is something that we very much focus on, sowing the seen and the unheard of those belonging moments, those moments that actually matter, which obviously then drive inclusion and of course create diversity. So certainly that's the way I would kind of think through that question.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And
All
I think
right,
it can be
Alessandro.
many levels as well. So from team all the way up to the organizational level too. So just to add on to that, that if there are individual managers here, then that gathering of data to influence the ways in which you're working as a team, can even just be done within team meetings. And I think that it's important that that our policies are flexible enough to be able to adapt to individuals and to individual teams as well, that all work in different ways. So even if you're not at the very top of the organization, then these principles are still things that you can bring in within your individual team to gather that information and then create ways of working that work for everyone.
Maybe Alessandro can just add a little bit more on digital culture. I sense there's an emergence of digital cultures on what you're talking about. What is digital culture, just to give an understanding for those that don't understand?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Ben. So Live More Offline, we define a healthy digital culture as thriving across 3 pillars: digital productivity, digital well-being, and virtual connection. Now, for many people, these are new things that we're talking about. So it's a new set of language. But digital productivity is this fact that we might hire some of the best and brightest people, but if we've got a way of working where they're constantly being bombarded by urgent emails and urgent messages, then it will be incredibly challenging for them to be able to achieve their really important work that requires them to focus. So the digital productivity is all around managing that aspect. Digital well-being, we've seen a lot of statistics around the blurred boundaries between home and work, inability to switch off outside of work, and also digital presenteeism, which is this concern to be visible online, this additional pressure to be visible online and to be responding to messages more quickly. And a poll that I ran with a CIPD audience recently showed 70% of people had experienced this digital presenteeism, and that keeps you constantly connected to your screen, which in turn has the well-being and performance impacts. And the final is virtual connection. So that our digital habits around how we conduct meetings, how we conduct our manager one-to-ones and our socials also lead to that belonging and engagement. So it's really, I would say, healthy digital culture is at the root, it's one of the roots of many of the things that we're talking about within organizations, like well-being and performance and engagement. It's starting at that, well, how are we working together and how has technology influenced the way that we're working together?
Sally, do you have anything to add to that?
I think, yeah, absolutely. So I think we've talked about some of this already, and certainly my area of focus is work-life blend. So historically, we've always talked about this work-life balance. So you kind of would come to an office, you would work a set period of time, and then you would leave. So you would leave your work and not see it for the rest of the day, night, etc. Obviously, because of the transformation and the digital way in which we work today, so the transformation technology, digital way of working, we're always on. We're kind of sort of the work that we do is kind of very similar to the way in which we consumerize our home life. And so if you think about the apps on a mobile and the work that can get done on that technology, you're always on. The work is always present with you. So therefore, there's this huge shift now away from work-life balance and how do you create that, but really like how do you blend and integrate your work? And that's where I think some of the work that Alex is doing around digital well-being is critical. And we're still at an early stage of that, if I'm absolutely honest, in trying to then educate, trying to help people feel comfortable, really sort of driving the right behaviors that make good habits, let's say, and remove those bad habits. And just remember, like, the number of lockdowns that people have experienced globally, normal life was taken away, wasn't it? In the sense of you couldn't maybe do sports that you might used to, whether it's in a team or whether it's a gym environment. You couldn't go out, socialize, eat and drink in restaurants, cinemas, theaters, etc. Normal life was stripped away for many, many, many people. And therefore, work was your only constant. So you're always going to be on, aren't you? Because you're feeling needed in a way of someone sending you an email. So you absolutely want to respond and make sure that you do the best that you can for that inquiry or for that customer or employee. So I just want to like pull that out, because that's where I keep coming back to those bad habits, because we were put in a very extreme situation where we didn't really have a huge opportunity to do much else. So that's kind of where we need to re-enable employees and managers, help them to think differently then as we enter into this new era of working, which is a digital age of working, where there will be work-life integration.
I think that's a really good point. I think there is an intensity around the work environment, whether it be around the work desk, wherever that might be, because of the lockdowns and because work has been the one constant, as you say, in many people's lives, that actually everything they're feeling is then is focused on work, and we need to help people through that. And it is an evolution. As you said earlier, we were thrown into this in March last year, and many companies like yours, Sally, and mine, we're big technology companies. We were able to shift people to working from home relatively easily and quickly. But since then, and then there's the unknown about how long was it going to last. So you were doing things just in the immediate to try and make things a bit better. But now we've got to that point where actually, this is the future of work, and we need to be really thoughtful about how we support our people through it. And there's lots more to come. The technologies are helping. The research is really helping. But it's exciting times in many ways, and there's more of this to come. And as I said earlier, it's going to take time as we find new ways of working.
Alex, any last comment around the issues that Candida is bringing up?
I wholeheartedly agree. So I think that it is an exciting time. I think that we are moving into a new way of working. And I think that this is the opportunity now to step back and say, okay, we've all been through a really challenging time. And now we're going to look at how we can make the workplace and the ways of working both sustainable and something that's really going to help our experience of work. And then looking ahead and putting those in place. So I think we're in a really exciting period of time. And if we get this right, it can make a real difference.
Thank you, guys. We're 16:40 now. Thank you for coming, Candida, Sally, Alessandro. Everybody watching, you've been tuned into CogX. Thank you for tuning in.